What's going on, everybody? My name is Mark and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel for the first time. Now if you clicked on this video, you're watching part 3 of a series that I decided to create, which topics cover making a Boba Fett helmet. Now since I started my channel, this video has been very long awaited, as I will be finally covering the topic of painting not just one but 2 Boba Fett helmets. One helmet will have the Return of the Jedi paint job, and then the other helmet will have the Book of Boba Fett paint job. And if you haven't seen parts 1 and 2, I do highly recommend that you check both of these videos out. In part 1, I cover 3D printing all the way to visor install, and then in part 2, I cover making a silicone mold of that same helmet so I can make a resin casted copy. If you want to check either of the two out, the link is in the description below. Now, to kick things off, just like I would with any other helmet paint job, I start by masking off the visor to prevent any unwanted paint from making contact with that area. And to ensure that I'm cutting off the excess tape as cleanly as possible, I'm using an X-Acto knife with a No. 1 size blade. These can be found pretty much anywhere, but I'll still provide a link in the description below. If you ever want to paint anything that is supposed to look battle damaged, especially if it involves Boba Fett, I want you to try to think about the paint order in reverse. So, if the helmet were made of metal, you would start with just that, a bare metal helmet. Then, hypothetically, you would apply whatever sequence of paint it is that is needed, and over time, as the helmet is shot at, stepped on, punched, kicked, and scraped, and thrown into the sands of Tatooine, you would end up with a pretty gnarly looking paint job. Well, this process is very similar in how the paint is layered. The only difference is that instead of creating the paint chips after the fact, we instead mask off the areas where paint is not wanted with masking fluid, and then we wipe away the masking fluid after the paint has had enough time to fully cure. For a paint job as complex as Boba Fett's, this process is repeated several times, as there are many varying layers to individual sections of his helmet. This is also relative to which variation of the helmet that you are wanting to paint. And for your convenience alone, I have already provided a link in the description where some pretty accurate paint diagrams can be found for whichever version of the helmet it is that you were wanting to paint. Or you can Google the Dented Helmet, which is a maker community helping fans like you build and collect movie-accurate Star Wars costumes and props. So if you've always dreamed of building your very own Boba Fett, Mandalorian, or Star Wars Bounty Hunter costume, I would start by pulling your source material from there. Now, moving on to what I was talking about earlier, the areas where you want to have paint chips are the areas where you need to apply masking fluid. This will protect that area from receiving any unwanted paint when the next layer of paint is sprayed. If you don't have masking fluid, there are alternate materials that you can use. For this project, I decided to go with toothpaste as a masking fluid because it doesn't damage paint, you can wipe it off easily if you make a mistake, you can dilute it if needed, and it is also dirt cheap. Once this is applied to the appropriate areas based on reference pictures, or more importantly, to your liking, you can go ahead with your second coat of paint. For the Book of Boba Fett helmet, I decided to go with Rust-Oleum Dark Hunter Green, which I find to be a very fitting name, given Boba Fett's notorious line of work. Now, I couldn't find this color in any other finish other than high gloss, so later I will have to follow up with a matte finish clear coat to dull down the finish. Of course, I will save that step for the very end. One other detail that I want to make sure to make mention of is that I ensured that I included a link in the description below where actual masking fluid can be purchased if that is what you prefer to use. While reviewing the Mandalorian Mercs forums, I have also read that liquid latex is a good alternative, as well as mustard. However, if you are going to apply mustard to white paint, keep in mind that some yellowing may occur for obvious reasons. Now, while we wait on that to dry, we can go ahead and start marking up our Return of the Jedi helmet, which is going to be a much more tedious process. But just like before, with the Book of Boba Fett helmet, anywhere on the helmet where exposed metal is supposed to be should be covered with a masking fluid. Also, if you're wanting to use the same diagram that I used as shown on my workbench, I have made sure to post the link for that in the description below. For coat number 2, I decided to go with Rust-Oleum Coastal Gray, which the entire helmet should receive. After this step, things do get a tad bit more complicated, as individual sections of the helmet will have to be masked off. Of course, before you move on to any further masking, it is recommended that you allow the paint to cure for at least 24 hours. I know that seems like a long time to wait, but you don't want to risk damaging paint that you do not want chipped. And chipping can occur if the paint is not fully cured before applying your tape. Now, if you're lucky enough that it doesn't chip when pulling your tape, then chances are your masking tape has left an impression in your paint's finish. Although these are both things that are easily correctable, the process is much simpler if you just employ some patience. Now, while that cures, the masking fluid from the Book of Boba Fett helmet can be wiped away. For this, you can use a damp washcloth and warm water. Between wiping away the unwanted paint and the toothpaste and wringing out the rag, it left my hands smelling minty fresh. If you use toothpaste as a masking fluid, also be sure to wipe away as much residual material as possible. I personally ran into an issue where I couldn't get my tape to stick in certain areas due to residual toothpaste that was still lingering on the helmet. A couple of dry paper towels should do the trick. One way that you can conserve tape when masking off certain sections of the helmet is to use paper. In my case, I had a stack of printer paper that was lying around that wasn't being used, so I cut the paper into shapes that were relative to the areas of the helmet that I didn't want to receive paint. Then, by leaving roughly a quarter inch of the tape hanging off of the edge of the paper, I was able to adhere the paper to the pre-existing tape that was on the helmet. Also, by doing this, you're further preventing unwanted paint from being pulled off when removing said tape. For coat number 3 on the Book of Boba Fett helmet, I decided to go with Rust-Oleum Red Currant, which I find to be a tad bit more vibrant than Rust-Oleum Colonial Red. Personally, I feel like Colonial Red would have been a much better fit for this project, but I have a trick that I'm going to try to employ later on that will help detract from the overall vibrancy of the helmet, contributing towards giving this helmet a slightly more weathered look. Essentially, what I will be doing later on is lightly spraying over the entire paint job with an airbrush in varying spots to make this helmet give off the impression that it is dirty. And 24 hours later, we reconvene with our Return of the Jedi helmet, gently wiping away all of the toothpaste that was initially applied to it. Since a significantly large amount of toothpaste was applied to this helmet, cleanup was a little bit more involved this time. I do recall having to change out the water at least once during this round. So normally, when I paint either a Return of the Jedi or an Empire Strikes Back Fett helmet, I always start with the dome section and work my way down. Masking off the rest of the helmet isn't too involved, as all I have to do is fashion a paper skirt underneath the rather simple tape line. And then for the next 2 coats of paint, I'll rinse and repeat the toothpaste method in repeated and varying spots until I get the desired look that I want. There is one thing that some prop artists will do when making this specific helmet, which is to use transfer paper to trace the exact geographic shapes of each individual paint chip, and then apply their masking fluid within the borders of their tracing. Since I wasn't going for 100% screen accuracy, I decided to exclude that step and just freehand it, as you probably would have ended up with a video that was 20 minutes longer. However, that is extremely tedious, and I have nothing but respect for anyone with the patience to sit and trace each individual paint chip layer by layer. Now that we have applied our next layer of paint, which is Rust-Oleum Espresso, just like before, give this paint plenty of time to fully cure, as rushing this process will only set you back inevitably. I feel like I cannot stress this enough. Once the paint fully cures, go ahead and wipe the minty flavored goop off of the dome, leaving behind no traces of residual gobbledygook. And then follow up by reapplying more toothpaste in repeated and varying spots. The shade of green that I decided to go with for our top coat is Rust-Oleum Moss Green. I wouldn't say that this is an accurate representation, as I feel like it is too green. A more accurate shade would be Italian Olive or Olive Drab, so hitting this with an airbrush with some black later is definitely going to help darken this up a bit. And now we return back to our Book of Boba Fett helmet with a very satisfying tape pull. as it is nice to see at least one of our helmets beginning to look like it is supposed to. It's not quite the instant gratification that I would like, but it is still pretty refreshing to look back and see how much progress has been made so far. Now, the next sections of this helmet to be painted are the side pieces on the right side of Boba's helmet. I appreciate that Disney decided to go back to something closer to the Empire Strikes Back variation of this helmet for this section, as the decals that go on the rangefinder housing and ear cap are very iconic and all around just a very cool look. You'll notice later that the Return of the Jedi helmet is dramatically different in that section, as there are no decals and instead just chipped paint. It's not even the same color. So, the color that I decided to go with for this section was called Rust-Oleum Metallic Champagne Bronze, which I feel like was relatively in the right neighborhood as far as color choice is concerned. Now, finally, we have reached one of my favorite parts of making a Boba Fett helmet, which involve adding the kill stripes to the left side of Boba's helmet. And if you didn't already guess it, it is different from one helmet to the next. In Empire Strikes Back, Boba has only 14 kill stripes, while in Return of the Jedi, the helmet has 18 kill stripes. And in The Mandalorian Season 2 and Book of Boba Fett, there are 18 orange kill stripes and a mysterious 19th black kill stripe. Now, there are a couple of working theories as to what this black kill stripe signifies, such as the Sarlacc that he fell into and then later came back and killed with Slave 1. It could also be representative of himself, because he did go through some life changes, having cheated death, and then separated from his armor for a short period of time while adopting the Tusken Raider lifestyle. He definitely is not the same cutthroat Boba Fett that he was always made out to be. The Boba that we got was fundamentally different, as we learned that he even allowed Cobb Vanth to wear his armor for a short period of time, as he was aware that Vanth was using it for good to keep Mos Pelgo safe. If Boba really wanted to take his armor back, he could have done that at any point. And so ends my mini rant on Boba Fett Killstripe theory. Now, just like earlier with the Book of Boba Fett helmet, it's time to start masking off areas of the helmet that we don't want to receive red paint. I'll also go ahead and employ my method of utilizing paper in tandem with the painter's tape, as the chances of pulling up unwanted paint while pulling said tape are even higher given that the paint is pre-chipped. I know that's kind of tricky, but the less tape you use in this scenario, the better. Also, I'll go ahead and be adding masking fluid to the areas that I want to remain either chrome or gray. Once you have everything masked off, go ahead and hit the helmet with some red and then allow enough time for the paint to fully cure before pulling your tape and wiping away the masking fluid. Now let's go ahead and switch things up and move back over to our Book of Boba Fett helmet, as the first 18 kill stripes should now be dry. Sometimes, if you overspray an area where painter's tape is adhered, the excess paint will seep underneath of the tape. I feel like this is the perfect opportunity for the audience to learn from my mistakes here and make sure that when you're spraying in short controlled bursts and you are at least 12 to 15 inches away from the target object. Sometimes you may also need to spray in multiple coats. By doing this, you're ensuring that you don't have to go back and make touch-ups, or rather as many touch-ups in the end. And just like I stated earlier, the Book of Boba Fett helmet has a 19th black kill stripe. Since it was such a small area, I decided to go ahead and make a template so I could paint this one on by hand by using a small flat brush. While I had my detail brushes out, I figured that this would also be the perfect opportunity to go ahead and paint on some additional details as well, such as the arrow-shaped cavities on the very front of the helmet, or the white arch that's located on the top of the left side piece of the helmet. Since I used acrylic paint, I was able to speed up the drying time significantly, so I didn't have to wait for it to air dry. Moving on, the cheek section is actually broken up into two different sections, so it does have an accent color. There's the flat cheek section, and also what I like to refer to as the cheekbone section, although I'm not sure that anybody actually refers to it as that. Either way, the cheekbone will be painted black for this project, while the flat cheek section will remain dark hunter green. I know that I said this earlier, but it is refreshing to look back and see just how much progress has been made up to this point. Now, switching gears, we move back over to the Return of the Jedi helmet to give the cheek sections very similar treatment in comparison to what we gave to the Book of Boba Fett helmet. To begin, the entire helmet needs to be masked off except for the cheeks, and then the masking fluid needs to be applied to the pre-chipped areas and varying gray areas per the provided helmet diagram. Then this section needs to be painted with the same shade of green that was used to paint the dome on the top of the helmet. Make sure that you allow plenty of time for this coat of paint to cure before wiping away the masking fluid, masking off the flat sections, and reapplying masking fluid if needed. And once you have completed all of the aforementioned steps, go ahead and spray a coat of dark hunter green and be sure to give the paint plenty of time to dry. While focusing back on the Book of Boba Fett helmet, I would like to start by saying that I am new to airbrushing, so for anybody that is watching that is a pro at this, please excuse my amateur technique. Essentially, what I'm trying to accomplish is making the helmet look dirty, and all that I'm doing is spraying the helmet in varying locations with black paint. In the past, I would instead apply a mixture of diluted black and brown acrylic paint and wipe away most of what was on there, while only leaving some residual paint behind. Also, as you may have noticed, I went ahead and sprayed the entire helmet with a matte finish clear coat to go ahead and get rid of that glossy look, and then I followed up with painting the last detail that I truthfully forgot about. I also made sure to spray that with matte finish clear coat as well. As far as painting the Return of the Jedi helmet goes, we are in the home stretch, so please bear with me. Now, the next section of the helmet to be painted is the back side of the helmet, which will also be painted with the same dark hunter green that we used on the cheekbone section of the helmet. For relatively decent accuracy in your paint chip placement, trust in the Force, and also trust in the helmet diagram that was exclusively provided to you for this video. Once everything has been properly masked off, go ahead and hit that section with some dark hunter green and then pull your tape once everything has had enough time to dry. After that, you can go ahead with wiping away the masking fluid and move on to the remaining sections of this helmet. I did make mention of this earlier, but from one helmet to another, the Return of the Jedi side pieces are dramatically different in comparison to either the Book of Boba Fett side pieces or the Empire Strikes Back side pieces of the helmet, which are very similar to each other. And again, let me share that on the screen so you can get a better visualization of what I'm talking about. While one helmet has side pieces that are somewhat colorful with intricate designs, the other helmet has side pieces that are very plain and very monochromatic. Of course, don't mistake this comparison for anything other than just that. However, a canonical explanation as to what Boba Fett got into in between Empire and Jedi that led his helmet to look like this would be nice. And if there is canon that explains this, I simply haven't read it yet, so go easy guys. Similar to how I airbrushed the Book of Boba Fett helmet, I utilized the same technique on my Return of the Jedi helmet to help detract from the overall vibrancy of the paint job. A weathered helmet that is not dirty is simply not believable. I also jumped the gun again on spraying down the helmet with clear coat, because as you can plainly see, I forgot to paint in the arrow-shaped indentions on the front of the helmet. The good thing about this, though, is that this is a fairly easy and quick fix, as the drying for acrylic paint can be sped up with a heat gun. But once this is complete, we can finally mosey on over to the final sequence of the video, I promise. While employing some of the same methods that you just watched me perform for the last 20 minutes, I have gone ahead and taken the liberty of painting up a couple of rangefinder antennas and ear caps relative to whichever helmet they go to, so we can go ahead and wrap this video up. To install the antennas, I'm using a simple machine screw with a flat washer, a lock washer, and a nut on the inside of the helmet to be able to adjust the tension on the rangefinder antenna if needed. And that just begs the question of how will the ear cap stay in place on the helmet? Well, some of you may not agree with this, but it is a rather semi-permanent solution. Quite simply, I decided to go with 5-minute epoxy, but hopefully in a way that won't be much trouble later down the line if an antenna needs to be replaced on either of these helmets. I have drilled cavities into the back side of the ear caps that line up perfectly with the heads of the machine screws, and that is the only place where I will be applying 5-minute epoxy. I am certain that this will lock the machine screw into place if tension needs to be adjusted from the inside of the helmet, while still allowing the antenna a full range of motion. And that, my friends, concludes my process for painting not just one, but 2 different Boba Fett helmets. I hope that everybody watching has enjoyed part 3 of this series, and if you truly liked this content, go ahead and hit the like button, then hit that subscribe button, and then hit the notification bell so you'll be notified when I publish new content. Also, if you haven't seen parts 1 and 2 to this series, I still highly recommend that you guys go check those out, and I'll leave a link in the description below. If anyone wants to try to follow along with this tutorial, I have provided links for every resource that was used in this process because it's my goal to empower my viewers to get out there, make some kick-ass props, and then show them off to your friends, family, and fellow cosplayers. I hope to see everyone again next time, and as always, thanks for watching.